The whispers started the morning. Clara Reynolds stepped off the stagecoach with mud on her traveling dress and tears staining her cheeks. And by Sunday service 3 weeks later, half the congregation believed she had committed sins too shameful to speak aloud. Petaluma, California, in the spring of 1878, was a town that thrived on gossip as much as it did on the cattle trade and dairy farms that dotted the rolling hills. Clara had arrived with nothing but a worn carpetbag and a letter of introduction to Mrs. Harriet Pemberton, who ran a modest boarding house on Main Street. The letter came from Clara's aunt in Sacramento, explaining that the young woman needed a fresh start after a terrible misunderstanding back east. But Mrs. Pemberton, who meant well despite her tendency to share confidences over tea, had mentioned this detail to Mrs. Florence Whitmore at the general store. Florence, whose tongue wagged faster than a dog's tail at dinner time, had added her own embellishments before passing the story to her daughter Lucinda. Lucinda Whitmore was 22 years old, beautiful as a painted sunrise, and cruel as a winter storm when it suited her purposes. She had set her cap for Wade Zimmerman the moment he rode into town 6 months prior, driving a herd of cattle north for a ranch owner in Sonoma County. Wade had stayed on, taking work at the Copper Creek Ranch just outside town, and Lucinda had been certain that by Christmas she would be Mrs. Wade Zimmerman. But Wade, with his sun-weathered face and quiet gray eyes, had shown little interest in Lucinda's obvious attempts to capture his attention. He was polite, tipping his hat when they passed on the street, but nothing more. Then Clara Reynolds arrived and everything changed. Clara was 23, with honey-colored hair that caught the light like spun gold and warm brown eyes that seemed to hold both sadness and hope in equal measure. She was soft-spoken and gentle, taking work at the bakery owned by German immigrants Hans and Greta Mueller. The Muellers were kind people who asked few questions and paid fair wages. Clara worked hard, arriving before dawn to help Greta with the bread and pastries, serving customers with a shy smile that gradually grew more confident as the days passed. Wade Zimmerman first saw her on a Thursday morning when he came into the bakery to buy supplies for the ranch hands. He had been reaching for a loaf of sourdough when their hands touched accidentally, and Clara had pulled back with a startled gasp, nearly dropping the bread. Their eyes met for just a moment, but it was enough. Wade felt something shift in his chest, like a key turning in a lock he had not known existed. "Sorry, miss," he said, his voice rough from years of calling to cattle across open ranges. "Did not mean to startle you." Clara's cheeks flushed pink. "No harm done, sir. Let me wrap that for you." Her hands trembled slightly as she wrapped the bread in brown paper, and Wade found himself wanting to know everything about her. Why did she seem so nervous? What had brought her to Petaluma? What made her smile, and what had caused the shadow of sadness he glimpsed in her eyes? "I'm Wade Zimmerman," he said, feeling suddenly awkward as a schoolboy. "I work out at Copper Creek Ranch, Clara Reynolds," she replied softly. "I'm pleased to make your acquaintance, Mr. Zimmerman." "Wade," he corrected. "Just Wade is fine." She smiled then, a real smile that lit up her whole face, and Wade knew he was lost. He started finding excuses to come into town more often. The ranch hands needed more bread. He needed new gloves from the general store, which just happened to be next door to the bakery. His horse needed shoeing, and the blacksmith's forge was across the street, giving him a perfect view of the bakery window. Each time he saw Clara, they talked a little longer. She told him about growing up in Pennsylvania, about losing her parents to fever when she was 16, about living with her aunt and uncle in Sacramento. She did not tell him why she had left Sacramento, and Wade did not press. Everyone had things they preferred to keep private. What Wade did not know was that Lucinda Whitmore had noticed his frequent visits to the bakery. She had watched through the window of her father's store as Wade and Clara stood talking on the boardwalk, had seen the way Wade's stern face softened when he looked at the newcomer. Jealousy bloomed in Lucinda's heart like poison ivy, spreading its toxic vines until she could think of nothing else. Lucinda began her campaign of destruction carefully. She mentioned to her friend Sarah that she had heard Clara had left Sacramento under suspicious circumstances. She told the minister's wife that Clara had been seen with various men in compromising positions back east. She whispered to anyone who would listen that Clara was not the innocent girl she pretended to be, that she had come to Petaluma to escape a scandal involving a married man. None of it was true. The reality was far simpler and more tragic. Clara had been employed as a governess for a wealthy family in Sacramento. The eldest son, a man of 30 who was engaged to be married, had developed an unwanted fixation on Clara. He had pursued her relentlessly, ignoring her rejections, until finally he tried to force himself on her in the library one evening. Clara had fought him off and run to her room, locking the door. But when she went to the boy's mother the next morning to explain what had happened and give her notice, she found that the son had already told a different story. He claimed that Clara had tried to seduce him, that she had thrown herself at him despite his engagement. The family had dismissed Clara without references and spread word among their social circle that she was a woman of loose morals who preyed on wealthy young men. Clara's aunt, who knew the truth, had scraped together enough money to send Clara to Petaluma, hoping that distance and time would allow her niece to start fresh. But Clara carried the weight of the false accusations like stones in her pockets, always afraid that somehow the lies would follow her. And now, thanks to Lucinda's vicious imagination, they had. By the third week of May, the rumors had spread through Petaluma like wildfire through dry grass. Women who had been friendly to Clara now crossed the street to avoid her. Customers at the bakery whispered behind their hands. Clara felt the change like a physical thing, a cold wind that followed her wherever she went. She did not understand what she had done to deserve such treatment. Greta Mueller noticed too. "Do not let them trouble you," she told Clara in her thick German accent as they worked together one morning. "People in small towns, they talk. It means nothing." But it meant everything to Clara, who had already been destroyed once by malicious gossip. She began to withdraw, speaking less, smiling less, trying to make herself invisible. She stopped taking her lunch break on the bench outside the bakery where she could watch the town go by. Instead, she ate in the back room, alone. Wade noticed the change immediately. When he came into the bakery on a Monday morning in early June, he found Clara subdued and pale, her eyes red-rimmed as though she had been crying. He wanted to ask what was wrong, but there were other customers in the shop, and Clara kept her attention fixed on her work. He caught up with her that evening as she was walking back to Mrs. Pemberton's boarding house. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and Main Street was mostly empty. "Clara," he called, and she turned, clutching her shawl around her shoulders. "Mr. Zimmerman," she said formally. "Good evening." "Wade," he reminded her, "we are friends, are we not?" Something flickered in her eyes, pain perhaps or fear. "I am not certain that is wise," Wade frowned. "What do you mean?" Clara looked down at her hands. "You should not be seen talking to me. It will damage your reputation." "My reputation?" Wade stepped closer, genuinely confused. "Clara, what are you talking about?" She shook her head, still not meeting his eyes. "You have not heard the talk." "What talk?" "About me." "About why I came to Petaluma." Her voice was barely a whisper. "About the kind of woman I am." Wade felt anger kindle in his chest. "I do not listen to gossip." "Perhaps you should," Clara said, and there was such defeat in her voice that Wade wanted to gather her into his arms and promise that everything would be all right. "Perhaps you should stay away from me, Wade. I seem to bring trouble wherever I go." "Tell me what happened," Wade said gently. "Tell me the truth." And there, in the fading light, Clara told him everything. About the governor's son in Sacramento, about the lies that had cost her everything, about coming to Petaluma hoping for a fresh start. Tears streamed down her face as she spoke, and her hands shook with the force of her emotions. "I have done nothing wrong," she said when she finished. "I have tried to live a good life, to be honest and kind, but it does not matter. The lies follow me like shadows." Wade was quiet for a long moment, processing what she had told him. Then he said, "I believe you." Clara looked up at him, her eyes wide with surprise. "You do?" "I am a fair judge of character," Wade said. "I have known men who would lie as easily as breathing, and I have known honest folks who would starve before they would cheat. You are one of the honest ones, Clara. I can see it in you." "But the things they are saying," Clara protested weakly, "are lies," Wade said firmly. "And lies can be fought with truth." "How?" Clara asked. "Who would believe me over Lucinda Whitmore and her friends? Her father owns the general store. Her uncle is on the town council. I am nobody, just a girl with no family and no prospects." Wade reached out and took her hand, and Clara did not pull away. His palm was calloused from years of hard work, warm and strong. "You are not nobody," he said. "Not to me." Clara felt something crack open inside her chest, something that had been frozen and locked away since Sacramento. She looked at Wade's weathered face, at the sincerity in his gray eyes, and she felt the first stirrings of hope. Over the next 2 weeks, Wade made it his mission to learn exactly what was being said about Clara and who was saying it. He talked to Hans Mueller, who spoke highly of Clara's work ethic and character. He talked to Mrs. Pemberton, who admitted that Clara was a model boarder who paid her rent on time and never caused trouble. He even cornered Samuel Wright, who worked at the telegraph office, and learned that no wanted notices or warnings about Clara Reynolds had ever come through from Sacramento or anywhere else. Armed with this information, Wade knew what he had to do, but he also knew that he could not do it alone. He needed proof, real proof that would make people question the gossip they had so eagerly consumed. The opportunity came on a Saturday afternoon when Wade rode into Sacramento on his fastest horse. He went to Clara's aunt, a sharp-eyed woman named Dorothy Hart, who welcomed him into her modest home with cautious interest. Wade explained who he was and why he had come, and Dorothy's expression softened. "Clara is a good girl," Dorothy said fiercely. "What happened to her was an injustice. That boy, that coward, he knew exactly what he was doing. He knew his parents would believe him over a penniless governess." "I need proof," Wade said. "I need something that will make people believe her." Dorothy thought for a moment, then went to her desk and pulled out a stack of letters. "Clara wrote to me regularly when she was working for the Ashford family," she said. "In these letters, she mentions repeatedly how uncomfortable the eldest son made her, how he would not leave her alone. She was afraid to tell the family because she needed the position, but she confided in me." Wade looked through the letters, dated over a period of months, and saw that Dorothy was right. Clara had documented the harassment in her own words, had expressed her fear and discomfort long before the incident that led to her dismissal. "May I take these?" Wade asked. Dorothy hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Bring them back when you are done. And Mr. Zimmerman, thank you for believing in my niece. She deserves happiness." Wade rode back to Petaluma with the letters tucked safely in his saddlebag and a plan forming in his mind. Sunday was the next day, and the whole town would be gathered in the white clapboard church on the hill. It was the perfect opportunity. But first, he needed to talk to Clara. He found her in the small garden behind Mrs. Pemberton's boarding house, sitting on a wooden bench and staring at nothing. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, and he saw that she had been crying again. "Wade," she said, trying to smile, "I did not expect to see you today." He sat down beside her, leaving a respectable distance between them, and took off his hat. "Clara, I need to ask you something important." She looked at him warily. "What is it? Do you trust me?" Clara blinked, surprised by the question. Then slowly she nodded. "Yes, I trust you." "Good," Wade said, "because tomorrow I am going to stand up in church and tell everyone the truth about what happened to you in Sacramento." Clara's eyes went wide with shock. "Wade, no, you cannot. That will only make things worse." "It will make things better," Wade insisted. "Clara, you have done nothing wrong. You should not have to live under this cloud of suspicion and lies. Let me fight for you. Let me show this town who you really are." "But why?" Clara asked, her voice breaking. "Why would you do this for me? You barely know me." Wade looked at her for a long moment, and then he spoke the truth that had been growing in his heart since the first moment he saw her. "Because I love you, Clara Reynolds. I have loved you since that first day in the bakery when you nearly dropped the bread. I love your gentleness and your strength, your kindness and your courage. I love the way you smile when you think no one is watching, and the way you bite your lip when you are concentrating on your work. I love everything about you, and I will not stand by and watch people destroy you with their lies." Clara stared at him, tears streaming down her face, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. No one had ever stood up for her like this. No one had ever believed in her so completely. "Wade," she whispered, "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything right now," Wade replied gently. "Just promise me you will come to church tomorrow. Will you do that?" Clara nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Wade reached out and brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb, the gesture so tender that Clara felt something inside her shift and settle, like a puzzle piece finally finding its proper place. "Everything is going to be all right," he said. "I promise you." That night, Clara lay awake in her small room at the boarding house, Wade's words echoing in her mind. He loved her. Wade Zimmerman, the quiet cowboy with the gentle eyes and strong hands, loved her. The knowledge filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She had not been looking for love when she came to Petaluma, had not believed herself capable of trusting a man again after what happened in Sacramento. But Wade was different. He saw her, truly saw her, and he believed her when no one else did. Clara realized, lying there in the darkness, that she loved him too. She loved his quiet strength and his unwavering integrity, the way he treated everyone with respect regardless of their station in life. She loved how safe she felt when he was near, how her heart lifted every time she saw him walking down the street toward the bakery. She had been falling in love with him gradually, day by day, conversation by conversation, and now the feeling filled her completely, crowding out the fear and shame that had haunted her for so long. But tomorrow, Wade was going to put his own reputation on the line for her. He was going to stand up in front of the entire town and defend her honor. What if they turned on him too? What if his loyalty to her cost him his job, his friends, his place in the community? Clara could not bear the thought of Wade suffering because of her. She almost decided not to go to church, to spare him the necessity of making such a public stand. But she had promised, and Clara Reynolds did not break her promises. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright, the California sky a flawless blue overhead. Clara dressed in her best dress, a simple blue cotton with white collar and cuffs, and pinned her hair up carefully. Her hands shook as she worked, and she had to start over twice before she was satisfied with the results. Mrs. Pemberton knocked on her door at 9:30. "Clara, dear, are you ready? We should leave for church soon." Clara took a deep breath and opened the door. Mrs. Pemberton looked at her with sympathy. "I know it has been difficult for you lately," the older woman said, "but I want you to know that I do not believe the gossip. I have known you for several weeks now, and you have been nothing but honest and hardworking. Whatever they say, I know the truth." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Pemberton. That means more to me than you know." They walked to church together, joining the stream of townspeople making their way up the hill. Clara kept her eyes down, trying to ignore the whispers and pointed stares. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like a rabbit in an open field surrounded by wolves. The church was packed, as it always was on Sunday mornings. Reverend Thomas Hartley was a popular preacher, known for his fiery sermons and his genuine care for his congregation. Clara and Mrs. Pemberton found seats near the back, and Clara folded her hands in her lap, trying to make herself as small and invisible as possible. Wade was already there, sitting near the middle of the church with some of the other ranch hands from Copper Creek. He turned when Clara entered, and their eyes met across the crowded room. He gave her a small, reassuring nod, and Clara felt her racing heart slow slightly. Lucinda Whitmore sat in the front row with her parents, her Sunday dress a confection of pink silk and lace ribbons. She was beautiful, and she knew it, holding herself with the confidence of someone who had never been denied anything she wanted. When she noticed Wade looking toward the back of the church, she followed his gaze and saw Clara. Her expression darkened, and she whispered something to her mother. The service began with hymns, the congregation rising to sing in voices that ranged from polished to enthusiastic. Clara sang quietly, the familiar words bringing her a measure of comfort. Then Reverend Hartley began his sermon, speaking about the importance of truth and the dangers of bearing false witness against one's neighbor. Clara wondered if the Reverend had chosen his topic deliberately, or if it was simply divine coincidence. He spoke passionately about how gossip and slander could destroy lives, how a community built on lies and suspicion could never truly flourish. Several people shifted uncomfortably in their pews, but no one looked at Clara. No one acknowledged that the Reverend's words might apply to recent events in their own town. The sermon ended, and Reverend Hartley asked if anyone had anything they wished to share with the congregation. This was a tradition in the church, a time for announcements, requests for prayer, or personal testimonies. Usually only a few people spoke, sharing news of births or marriages or thanking the community for support during difficult times. There was a long silence. Then Wade Zimmerman stood up. The movement was so unexpected that several people gasped. Wade was not known for speaking in church. He attended regularly, sat quietly, and left as soon as the service ended. Seeing him rise to address the congregation was as shocking as if one of the wooden pews had suddenly sprouted wings and flown around the room. "Reverend Hartley," Wade said, his voice steady and clear, "I have something to say." The Reverend, looking surprised but interested, nodded. "Please, Wade, speak." Wade turned to face the congregation, his hat in his hands. Clara felt her heart stop. This was it. This was the moment when everything would change for better or worse. "I am not much for public speaking," Wade began, "so I will keep this simple. There is a young woman in this congregation who has been the subject of cruel gossip for the past several weeks. Her name is Clara Reynolds, and she works at the Mueller Bakery." A ripple of whispers ran through the church. Clara felt every eye turn toward her, and she wanted to sink through the floor and disappear. But Mrs. Pemberton reached over and squeezed her hand, giving her strength. I have heard what people are saying about Miss Reynolds, Wade continued, his voice growing stronger. I have heard that she came here to escape a scandal, that she tried to seduce a married man, that she is a woman of loose morals who cannot be trusted. I have heard all of this, and I am here to tell you that every single word of it is a lie. The whispers grew louder, more agitated. Lucinda Whitmore stood up, her face flushed with anger. You have no right to speak about things you know nothing about. Wade looked at her steadily. I know the truth, Miss Whitmore, and I think it is time everyone else did too. He reached into his coat and pulled out the letters that Dorothy Hart had given him. Miss Reynolds worked as a governess for a wealthy family in Sacramento. While she was employed there, the eldest son of the family pursued her against her will. Miss Reynolds rejected his advances repeatedly, and she wrote to her aunt about the situation, expressing her discomfort and fear. I have those letters here, dated over several months, documenting the harassment she endured. Wade held up the letters so everyone could see. When this man finally tried to force himself on Miss Reynolds, she fought him off and went to his parents to resign her position. But he had already told them a lie, claiming that she had tried to seduce him. The family dismissed her without references and spread false rumors about her character. Miss Reynolds came to Petaluma to start over, to build a new life free from these lies. But someone in this town decided to create new lies, even more vicious than the old ones. He looked directly at Lucinda, who had gone pale. Miss Whitmore, I know you are responsible for the gossip that has been circulating about Miss Reynolds. I know you have been telling people that she was involved with multiple men, that she is not fit for decent society. I want to know why. What did Miss Reynolds ever do to you? Lucinda opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her mother put a hand on her arm, but Lucinda shook it off. She came here and tried to take what was mine, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. And what was that? Wade asked. You, Lucinda practically shouted. You were supposed to notice me, to court me. But then she arrived and you only had eyes for her. It is not fair. The church was utterly silent. Everyone stared at Lucinda, shocked by her outburst. Even her parents looked mortified. Wade's expression softened slightly. Miss Whitmore, I am sorry if you believe there was an understanding between us, but there never was. I have never courted you or given you reason to think I intended to. I have always been polite, nothing more. You cannot claim ownership of another person's attention or affection. He turned back to the congregation. Miss Reynolds is one of the kindest, most honest people I have ever met. She works hard, treats everyone with respect, and asks for nothing more than a fair chance to build a good life. She does not deserve the way this town has treated her. She deserves an apology, and she deserves the truth to be known. Wade paused, then said the words that would change everything. I love Clara Reynolds, and I intend to marry her if she will have me. I am asking all of you to put aside the gossip and the lies, to see her for who she truly is. Judge her by her actions, not by rumors spread by someone who was jealous and spiteful. Clara felt as though her heart might explode. Wade had not only defended her honor, he had declared his love for her in front of the entire town. She stood up, her legs shaking and every head swiveled toward her. Is this true, Miss Reynolds? Reverend Hartley asked gently. Is what Wade says accurate? Clara's voice was quiet but steady when she spoke. Yes, Reverend, everything Wade said is true. I came to Petaluma hoping to leave the past behind, to start fresh. I have worked hard and tried to live honestly. I do not know what I did to make Miss Whitmore dislike me so much, but the things she has said about me are lies. I have never behaved improperly with any man. She looked at Wade, her eyes shining with tears. And yes, I love Wade Zimmerman. I did not think I would ever trust a man again after what happened in Sacramento, but Wade has shown me that there are still good, honorable people in this world. He has believed in me when no one else did." Greta Mueller stood up from her pew. "I can tell you that Clara Reynolds is a good woman," she said in her accented English. "She works for me every day, and I have never seen anything but honesty and kindness from her. If people in this town spent more time looking at what is true and less time spreading lies, we would all be better off." Hans Mueller stood beside his wife. "I agree. Miss Reynolds has done nothing to deserve this treatment." One by one, other people began to stand. Mrs. Pemberton spoke up, defending Clara's character. Samuel Wright from the telegraph office confirmed that no wanted notices or warnings had ever come through about Clara. Even some of the ranch hands who worked with Wade added their voices, saying that Wade was the most honest man they knew, and if he vouched for Miss Reynolds, that was good enough for them. Reverend Hartley raised his hand for quiet. "It seems clear that a grave injustice has been done. Miss Whitmore, do you have anything to say?" Lucinda looked around at the faces of her neighbors, saw the disappointment and anger there, and burst into tears. "I am sorry," she sobbed. "I was jealous and angry, and I said terrible things. I did not think about how it would hurt Miss Reynolds. I just wanted Wade to notice me." Her father, red-faced with embarrassment, stood and put his arm around his daughter. "Lucinda will apologize properly to Miss Reynolds, and we will make sure everyone knows the truth. I am deeply ashamed of what my daughter has done." Clara felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It was not perfect. There would still be people who believed the lies, but this was more than she had dared to hope for. Wade had stood up for her, had fought for her honor, and in doing so had given her back her dignity. After the service ended, people came up to Clara to apologize, to shake her hand, to welcome her properly to Petaluma. Lucinda approached last, her eyes downcast and her face blotchy from crying. "Miss Reynolds," she said quietly, "I am truly sorry for what I did. It was cruel and wrong, and I have no excuse. I hope someday you can forgive me." Clara looked at the younger woman and saw not an enemy but someone who had made a terrible mistake out of pain and jealousy. "I forgive you, Miss Whitmore," she said. "I hope you will learn from this and be kinder in the future." Lucinda nodded and hurried away with her parents. Finally, the church was empty except for Clara, Wade, and Reverend Hartley. The Reverend smiled at them both. "That was quite a dramatic service," he said. "But I believe good has come of it. Wade, you showed great courage in standing up for the truth. Miss Reynolds, I hope you will feel welcome in our community from now on." "Thank you, Reverend," Clara said. When they were alone outside the church, Wade and Clara stood facing each other in the bright June sunshine. The rolling hills of Petaluma stretched out around them, green and gold and beautiful. "You really meant what you said in there?" Clara asked. "About loving me, about wanting to marry me?" Wade stepped closer and took both her hands in his. "Every word. I know we have not been acquainted long, but I know my own heart. I love you, Clara. I love everything about you. I want to build a life with you if you will have me." Clara felt tears of joy streaming down her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Wade, I will marry you. I love you so much." Wade pulled her into his arms and kissed her, right there on the church steps where everyone could see. It was a kiss full of promise and hope and the kind of love that could weather any storm. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless and smiling. "I do not have much to offer you," Wade said. "Just a cowboy's wages and a heart that is completely yours." "That is everything I need," Clara replied. "We will build our future together." They were married 4 weeks later in the same white clapboard church, with half the town in attendance. Clara wore a simple dress of ivory silk that Mrs. Pemberton had helped her sew, with wildflowers in her hair. Wade wore his best suit, his hair slicked back and his boots polished to a shine. He looked nervous as a colt facing its first saddle, but when Clara walked down the aisle toward him, his face broke into such a radiant smile that several women in the congregation sighed with romantic envy. Reverend Hartley performed the ceremony, speaking about love and forgiveness, truth and redemption. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Wade kissed Clara so thoroughly that even the Reverend blushed. The reception was held in the town square, with tables laden with food and a trio of musicians playing fiddle tunes. Hans and Greta Mueller had baked an enormous cake decorated with sugar flowers. Mrs. Pemberton had organized the whole event with military precision, determined to show Clara that she was now fully accepted into the community. Even Lucinda Whitmore came, though she stayed only long enough to offer her congratulations and a small wedding gift, a set of embroidered napkins. She had been humbled by the incident in church and had become much quieter, more thoughtful. Clara accepted the gift graciously and thanked her. Wade and Clara danced together as the sun set, the first stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "I never imagined I could be this happy," Clara whispered as they swayed to the music. "Neither did I," Wade replied, holding her close. "But here we are, Clara echoed and kissed him again. They spent their first night as husband and wife in a small house that Wade had been renting on the outskirts of town. It was modest, just 3 rooms and a front porch, but it was theirs. Wade carried Clara over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the parlor. "Welcome home, Mrs. Zimmerman," he said. Clara looked around at the simple furniture, the curtains she had sewn herself, the vase of wildflowers on the table. "It is perfect," she said. "Absolutely perfect." That night, in the privacy of their bedroom, Wade and Clara discovered each other with tenderness and passion. Wade was gentle, patient, making sure Clara felt safe and cherished. Clara, who had been so afraid of physical intimacy after her experience in Sacramento, found that with Wade everything was different. There was no fear, no shame, only love and desire and the joy of being completely known and accepted. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, Clara's head on Wade's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I was so afraid," Clara admitted quietly. "Afraid that I would never be able to trust anyone again, that what happened in Sacramento had broken something inside me that could not be fixed." Wade stroked her hair gently. "You are the strongest person I know," he said. "What happened to you was not your fault, and it did not break you. You survived, and you kept your heart open enough to love again. That takes incredible courage." "I could not have done it without you," Clara said. "You gave me back my faith in people, in the possibility of happiness." "We gave that to each other," Wade replied. "We found each other exactly when we needed to." The next morning, Clara woke to find Wade already up, making coffee in the kitchen. She wrapped a shawl around her nightgown and padded out to join him, still not quite believing that this was her life now, that she had this good man and this home and this future stretching out before her. Wade poured her a cup of coffee and kissed her forehead. "Good morning, wife." "Good morning, husband," Clara replied, loving the way the word felt in her mouth. They sat together at the kitchen table, planning their day, their week, their life. Wade would continue working at Copper Creek Ranch for now, but he was saving money with the hope of eventually buying his own piece of land. Clara would keep working at the bakery until she was needed at home, whenever that might be. The weeks turned into months, and summer gave way to autumn. Clara and Wade settled into married life with ease, finding joy in the simple routines of cooking together, sitting on the porch in the evenings, walking into town hand in hand on Saturday afternoons. The people of Petaluma had accepted Clara fully now, greeting her warmly on the street, including her in quilting bees and church socials. In October, Clara realized she was pregnant. She told Wade one evening after supper, watching his face light up with wonder and delight. "A baby," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes," Clara said, laughing and crying at the same time. "In the spring, I think. April or May." Wade picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down carefully, worried he might hurt her. "Sorry, I did not think." "I am not made of glass," Clara teased, "but I am happy you are excited." "Excited does not begin to cover it," Wade said. He knelt down and placed his hand gently on Clara's still flat stomach. "Hello there, little one. Your mama and I cannot wait to meet you." The pregnancy was not easy. Clara suffered from terrible morning sickness for the first 3 months, and the winter was harder than usual, with cold rains that seemed to seep into every corner of the house. But Wade was there for every moment, holding her hair back when she was sick, warming her feet by the fire, reading to her in the evenings from a copy of Shakespeare's sonnets that had belonged to his mother. In March, Wade came home with news. The owner of Copper Creek Ranch was retiring and selling off parcels of his land. Wade had saved enough for a down payment on 50 acres with a creek running through it, good grazing land for cattle, and a spot perfect for building a house. "It would be ours," he told Clara, his eyes shining. "Our own land, our own ranch. We could build it up slowly, a few head of cattle at a time, and eventually make a real go of it. What do you think?" Clara took his hands in hers. "I think it sounds wonderful. I think we should do it." They bought the land and immediately began making plans. Wade wanted to have at least a small cabin built before the baby came, something more substantial than their rented house in town. He worked every spare moment, with help from the other ranch hands and some of the men from town who had become friends. Even Hans Mueller came out on Sundays to lend a hand, bringing fresh bread and Greta's hearty stew. The cabin was finished in mid-April, just 2 weeks before Clara went into labor. It was a simple structure, just 2 rooms with a loft for sleeping, but it was solid and well built, with a stone fireplace and real glass windows. Clara cried when she saw it, overwhelmed by the thought that this was truly theirs, that they were building a future here on this land. On May 2nd, 1879, Clara's labor began just after midnight. Wade rode into town to fetch Doc Morrison, an elderly physician who had delivered half the babies in Petaluma. Greta Mueller came as well, to help with the birth and provide support. The labor was long and difficult. Clara labored through the night and into the next day, gripping Wade's hand so hard she left bruises. Wade stayed by her side the entire time, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, telling her how strong she was, how much he loved her. Finally, as the sun was setting on May 3rd, their son was born. He came into the world squalling and red-faced, perfectly healthy. Doc Morrison placed him in Clara's arms, and she looked down at his tiny face with wonder. "He is beautiful," she whispered. "He looks like you," Wade said, his voice choked with tears. They named him William Theodore Zimmerman. William for Wade's father, who had died when Wade was young, and Theodore for Clara's father. Little William was a hungry baby who nursed eagerly and slept in fits and starts, keeping both his parents exhausted but deliriously happy. Clara found that she loved being a mother. She loved the weight of William in her arms, the sweet smell of his head, the way he gazed up at her with unfocused eyes. Wade was a devoted father, walking the floor with William when he fussed, singing him songs in his rough cowboy voice, staring at him as though he could not quite believe this small person was real. The ranch kept them busy. Wade spent long days working the land, fixing fences, building a barn. Clara managed the house and cared for William, but she also helped with the ranch work when she could, feeding the chickens they had acquired, tending the vegetable garden she had planted. It was hard work, but it was satisfying in a way that Clara had never experienced before. They were building something real, something that would last. When William was 6 months old, Mrs. Pemberton came to visit, bringing a rocking chair she had bought at an estate sale. "Every mother needs a good chair for rocking babies," she declared, and Clara hugged her with gratitude. Life settled into a rhythm. The seasons turned. William grew from an infant to a toddler, taking his first steps on wobbly legs while Wade and Clara watched with pride. They added more cattle to their small herd, slowly building up the ranch. Wade proved to be an excellent rancher, with an instinct for the work that impressed the other cattlemen in the area. On William's second birthday, Clara discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in January of 1882 they welcomed a daughter, Sarah Grace Zimmerman. She was small and delicate, with Clara's honey-colored hair and Wade's gray eyes. William was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help care for her. He would bring her toys, sing to her in his childish voice, and kiss her gently on the forehead. Clara and Wade watched their children together and marveled at the life they had built. The ranch prospered. They added more acreage, built a proper barn and a larger house. Wade's reputation as an honest rancher and a skilled cattleman grew, and he was able to hire a few hands to help with the work. Clara kept the books and managed the household, proving to have a head for numbers that served them well. On a warm evening in June of 1883, Clara and Wade sat on the porch of their house, watching William chase fireflies while Sarah toddled after him on unsteady legs. The sun was setting over the rolling hills, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. "Do you ever think about that day in church?" Clara asked. "When you stood up and told everyone the truth." Wade took her hand and laced his fingers through hers. "Sometimes. It was the easiest decision I ever made." "Really?" Clara looked at him in surprise. "It must have been terrifying." "I was scared," Wade admitted. "Scared that no one would believe me, that I would make things worse for you. But I was more scared of losing you, of watching you be destroyed by lies when I knew I could fight for you. I loved you too much to stay silent." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "You saved me that day. Not just my reputation, but me. You gave me back my life." "You did the same for me," Wade said. "Before I met you, I was just going through the motions, working and sleeping and working again. You gave me a reason to want more, to build something real. You gave me a family, a home, a purpose. You saved me too." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play in the gathering dusk. William caught a firefly and cupped it carefully in his hands, showing it to Sarah, who clapped with delight. "I love you, Wade Zimmerman," Clara said softly. "I love you, Clara Zimmerman," Wade replied. "Always and forever." The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. William grew into a serious boy who loved books and horses in equal measure. Sarah was sunshine personified, always laughing, always finding wonder in the smallest things. In 1885, they had another son, James Robert, who proved to be the most adventurous of the three, always climbing trees and getting into mischief. The ranch became one of the most successful in the area. Wade was elected to the town council, where he worked to improve schools and infrastructure. Clara became known for her charitable work, organizing aid for families in need and serving as a mentor to young women new to the area. When Lucinda Whitmore married a banker from San Francisco and moved away, she stopped by the ranch to say goodbye. She and Clara had never become close friends, but they had reached a place of mutual respect. "I want to thank you," Lucinda said as they stood on the porch, "for forgiving me. I was so foolish and cruel, and you had every right to hate me. But you showed me grace instead, and that changed me. I try every day to be a better person because of the example you set." Clara took Lucinda's hand. "We all make mistakes. What matters is that we learn from them and grow. I wish you every happiness in your new life." After Lucinda left, Wade put his arm around Clara. "You have the biggest heart of anyone I know," he said. "I learned from the best," Clara replied, kissing his cheek. In 1890, William left for university in San Francisco, determined to study law. It was hard to let him go, but Clara and Wade were proud of the young man he had become. Sarah, now 8, cried for days after her big brother left, but William wrote faithfully every week, long letters describing his classes and his adventures in the big city. The turn of the century found Wade and Clara in their 40s, their children growing up, the ranch thriving. They had built a life that exceeded anything Clara had imagined that day. She stepped off the stagecoach in Petaluma with nothing but a carpetbag and a broken heart. On their 20th anniversary, Wade took Clara on a trip to San Francisco. They stayed in a fancy hotel, attended the opera, and walked along the waterfront hand in hand. One evening, as they watched the sun set over the Pacific Ocean, Wade pulled Clara close. "You have any regrets?" he asked. Clara thought about the question seriously. She thought about Sacramento, about the lies that had nearly destroyed her, about the fear and pain she had endured. She thought about standing in that church, terrified and ashamed, while Wade stood up and fought for her. "No," she said finally. "I do not have any regrets. Everything that happened, even the painful things, led me to you, led me to this life we have built together. I would not change a single moment." "Neither would I," Wade said. "Except maybe I would have asked you to marry me sooner." Clara laughed. "We had only known each other a few months when you proposed." "I knew after a few days," Wade countered. "I was just being respectable." They returned to the ranch and to their children, to the land they had nurtured and the community they had helped build. William graduated from university and returned to Petaluma to open a law practice, determined to fight for justice the way his father had fought for his mother. Sarah became a teacher, working with immigrant children and helping them learn English. James took over more and more of the ranch operations, showing the same instinct for the work that Wade had. In 1905, when Clara was 49 and Wade was 51, their first grandchild was born. William and his wife Anne had a daughter, and they named her Clara, after the grandmother who had shown such strength and grace in the face of adversity. Holding her tiny namesake, Clara felt the circle of her life complete. She had come to Petaluma broken and afraid, carrying the weight of lies and injustice. But she had found love, had built a family, had created a legacy that would continue long after she was gone. Wade came to stand beside her, looking down at the sleeping baby in her arms. "She is beautiful, just like her grandmother." "We did well, did we not?" Clara said, looking up at her husband. "We built something good." "We did," Wade agreed. "And it all started that day in the bakery when you nearly dropped the bread." "And continued," Clara added, "when you stood up in church and told the truth. That was the bravest thing I have ever seen anyone do." Wade shook his head. "The bravest thing was you, surviving what you went through and still being willing to trust, to love, to hope. You are the strongest person I have ever known, Clara Zimmerman. You always have been." They stood together, surrounded by their family, in the house they had built on the land they had nurtured, and Clara knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The lies that had once threatened to destroy her had been defeated by truth and love. The reputation that had been ruined had been restored, not just restored but enhanced by the life she had lived. As the years went on, Clara and Wade grew old together. Their hair turned gray, their steps became slower, but their love never dimmed. They sat on their porch in the evenings, watching the sunset, holding hands just as they had done decades before. They told their grandchildren stories about the old days, about how they met, about how Wade had stood up in church and changed both their lives forever. And when people in Petaluma talked about Clara and Wade Zimmerman, they did not speak of scandal or gossip. They spoke of love, of courage, of the kind of partnership that could weather any storm. They spoke of a man who had stood up for truth when it would have been easier to stay silent, and a woman who had survived injustice with her integrity intact. Clara lived to see her great-grandchildren born, to hold them in her arms and tell them that love was the most powerful force in the world, that truth always won in the end, that redemption was possible for anyone brave enough to reach for it. When Clara passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78, Wade was holding her hand. He followed her 6 months later, his heart simply unable to beat without hers. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built, under a spreading oak tree that provided shade and shelter. Their children and grandchildren continued the legacy they had created. The ranch remained in the family for generations. William's law practice became known throughout California for taking cases others would not touch, for defending the innocent and speaking truth to power. Sarah's students went on to become teachers themselves, spreading her philosophy of kindness and inclusion. James raised his own children to love the land and care for it responsibly. And on Sundays in the white clapboard church in Petaluma, people still told the story of the day Wade Zimmerman stood up and defended Clara Reynolds, of how one man's courage had changed 2 lives and inspired a whole community to choose truth over gossip, love over judgment. The story became part of the town's folklore, passed down from generation to generation. Young couples would visit Clara and Wade's graves, holding hands and making promises to each other about always standing up for what was right, about loving fiercely and honestly, about never letting lies destroy what was good and true. In the end, Clara's story was not one of victimhood or scandal. It was a story of love conquering all, of truth prevailing over lies, of 2 people finding each other against all odds and building something beautiful that would last long after they were gone. The lies that had once threatened to destroy her became nothing more than a footnote, a dark moment overcome by the light of Wade's love and her own courage. The reputation that had been ruined was not just restored, but transformed into something greater, a legacy of strength and grace that inspired everyone who heard it. And in the fertile valleys of California, where the grass grew green and the cattle grazed peacefully, the story of Clara and Wade lived on, a testament to the power of love, the importance of truth, and the courage it takes to stand up and speak when silence would be easier. Their great-great-grandchildren still lived on the land, still told the stories, still remembered the day in church when everything changed. And on warm summer evenings, when the sun set over the rolling hills and the fireflies came out to dance, you could almost see them there, Clara and Wade, sitting on their porch, holding hands, watching over the family and the land they loved. It was a good ending, the kind that Clara had dreamed of but never quite believed possible. It was the ending she deserved, the one Wade had fought for, the one they had built together through years of love and partnership and unwavering commitment to each other. And so the story of Clara Reynolds and Wade Zimmerman, of vicious lies and courageous truth, of a reputation ruined and a love that saved everything, became immortal, a reminder that even in the darkest moments hope remains, that one person standing up can change the world, and that true love, real love, the kind that sees you and believes in you and fights for you, can overcome anything. The Wild West was a hard place, full of danger and uncertainty. But it was also a place where people could reinvent themselves, where the past did not have to define the future, where love could flourish in the most unlikely circumstances. Clara and Wade's story was proof of that. A beacon of light in the darkness, a promise that happily ever after was not just possible but real for those brave enough to reach for it. Their love story ended not with grand gestures or dramatic moments, but with the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived, of promises kept and dreams fulfilled. It ended with children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, with land that was cared for and loved, with a community that was better because they had been part of it. It ended with two souls who had found each other, held onto each other through every storm, and loved each other until the very last breath. And that, in the end, was the greatest triumph of all. Not that Clara's reputation had been restored, though it had been. Not that the lies had been defeated, though they had been. But that despite everything, despite the pain and the injustice and the cruelty, love had won. Love had triumphed. Love had saved them both and given them a life beyond anything they had imagined. The story of Clara and Wade Zimmerman was a love story in the truest sense, the kind that reminded people why they believed in romance, why they took chances on love, why they stood up for what was right even when it was hard. It was a story that would be told for generations, a reminder that in a world that could be harsh and unforgiving, love remained the most powerful force of all. And somewhere in the rolling hills of Petaluma, California, under the spreading oak tree on the hill, Clara and Wade rested together, their love story complete, their legacy secure, their happily ever after fully and finally realized.